I practiced so hard, my fingers bled. Here's what I learned. When I was in high school, I practiced so hard one summer that my fingertips actually detached slightly from my fingers. There was blood on the keys, and before you think that sounds insane, I want to tell you exactly what happened, what I learned from it, and what it could teach you about developing real strength at the piano. Because the answer might surprise you. I was 17 years old and had been accepted to study for a summer at the Mozarteum in Salzburg, Austria. Now, if you don't know the Mozarteum, it's one of the great music conservatories in the world, and it sits in the birthplace of Mozart himself. You walk those streets and you feel it, the history, the expectation, the sense that music is not a hobby here, it's a way of life. And I arrived there with enormous ambition and an enormous piece of music to match it, the music of Franz Liszt. Liszt is not music you play casually. Liszt demands everything from you, your technique, your stamina, your physical power at the keyboard. And I was determined. I was going to practice until I had it. What I didn't fully understand at 17 was what happened to your hands when you pushed them beyond your current limits. The practice rooms at the Mozarteum were decent size with Bösendorfer grand pianos, stone walls, and I was in there for hours every day, more hours than my hands were ready for. The music required enormous finger strength, the kind of power that let you project a melody above a roaring accompaniment in both hands simultaneously. And somewhere in those long practice sessions, the repeated pressure and friction caused by my fingertips to detach ever so slightly from the nail bed on several fingers. You know, it wasn't dramatic, but there was some bleeding, and there was pain, actually excruciating pain. And I remember sitting at that piano in Salzburg and thinking, is this what it takes? Do you have to bleed in order to develop strength at the piano? Here's why I have to be completely honest with you. The simple answer is, no, you don't have to bleed the way I did. The amount of pain I experienced was the result of overwork, of practicing far more hours than my hands were ready for. That part was avoidable, but here's what I've come to understand the years since. The process of fingernails adjusting, of detaching to some degree from the nail bed is actually a necessary stage of development for a pianist. Here's why. Proper piano technique requires curved, rounded fingers, not flat, not extended, curved. And when you play with rounded fingers, your fingertip, not the nail, must make contact with the key. But if your fingernails are long or if the soft tissue at the end of your finger hasn't yet developed the resilience to support that pressure, the nail hits the key. You hear that clicking sound and you lose control of your touch. What develops over time, though, through playing, is the building up of the fingertips, the pads, callus-like cushions at the very tip of each finger that allows you to play with full rounded technique without the nail interfering. And the honest truth is, the development of those pads almost inevitably involves the nail separating slightly from the nail bed at some point in the pianist's growth. It's not something to be afraid of. It's a sign your technique is developing the right way. What I did wasn't the process, it was the reckless speed at which I forced it. Here's what I now know that I didn't know then. Strength at the piano isn't built through sheer repetition and force, it's built through intelligent repetition, with recovery built into the process. Think about how athletes train. A sprinter doesn't run at full speed for 6 hours. A weightlifter doesn't max out every single set. They push and then they rest, and in the rest, the hands are exactly the same. The muscles, they grow stronger. You know, for example, if I were to play a Liszt passage and do it with full power to build strength, demanding repertoire like in Liszt, and you get Now that's just an example. You know, when you're playing Liszt and Rachmaninoff, Prokofiev, the key is not longer practice sessions, it's more focused ones. Take the hardest passage, isolate it, practice it with full intentionality for 5 minutes, then rest your hands, walk around, literally shake them out, come back in 20 minutes and do it again. That cycle of effort and recovery is how real strength is built. But there's something else that I learned that summer in Salzburg that goes beyond technique. Being surrounded by that level of musicianship, by students and teachers who had devoted their entire lives to this, I realized that physical strength at the piano was only one part of the equation. The pianists I admired the most weren't the ones who played the loudest. They were the ones who played with control, who could make a fortissimo feel inevitable, not forced, and a pianissimo, a whisper that can still sing. Strength without control is just noise. You know, think about if you played like this. Compared to this. I hope you can hear the difference. Strength without control is, like I say, just noise. So you can hear the difference, I'm sure. The arm has to be engaged. The weight of the arm, not just the fingers, is what creates true power at the piano. When you use only finger pressure to produce volume, you're working against yourself. And that's how injuries happen. That's what happened to me. But when you use arm weight supported through relaxed shoulders, the sound opens up and your hands stay healthy. So do you have to bleed to develop strength at the piano? Not the way I did, but the development of your fingertips, the building of those pads that let you play with proper rounded technique, that process is real and it takes time and, you know, some discomfort. Embrace the process, but don't rush it like I did. And that summer, with slightly detached fingernails and a lot of humility, I started to understand something that stayed with me ever since. The path to power at the piano is through intelligence, not punishment. Practice hard, practice focused, and then let your hands recover. If you have questions about your technique or your piano practice, leave them here in the comments below. I read every one, and if you'd like to explore the world of pianos with me further, visit us at livingpianos.com. We are your online piano resource. We'll see you in the next video.